The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Boot Hill Cemetery in Black Hawk, Colorado, as Delilah Harper knelt beside a simple wooden cross, her fingers trembling while she poured water from a tin pitcher over the wild prairie roses she had planted there 3 months earlier. The year was 1878, and the mining town that sprawled below the hillside had taken so much from so many, including the man who lay beneath the earth at her knees, his life snuffed out by a collapsing mine shaft that had crushed him along with 11 other souls who had been seeking fortune in the mountain's belly. Owen Kearney watched from beneath the shade of a gnarled pine tree, his hat held respectfully in his weathered hands as he observed the young woman's ritual of devotion. He had been coming to this same cemetery for 2 years now, ever since consumption had stolen his wife Margaret from him, leaving him alone on his cattle ranch with nothing but memories and the endless work that came with managing 500 acres of grazing land. He recognized the particular set of shoulders that came with fresh grief, the way her spine curved forward as if the weight of loss was a physical burden she carried, and something in his chest tightened with understanding that transcended words. The rancher had seen her here before, always on Thursdays, always with the same pitcher and the same careful attention to the flowers that somehow managed to grow in this harsh altitude where the air was thin and the weather unpredictable. Today, however, something compelled him to approach rather than maintain his usual respectful distance. Perhaps it was the way the setting sun caught the copper highlights in her dark hair, or maybe it was simply that 2 years of solitude had finally worn down the walls he had built around himself after Margaret's passing. "Those roses are looking mighty healthy," he said softly, not wanting to startle her as he moved closer. "Not many folks can get anything to grow up here at this elevation." Delilah's head turned quickly, her green eyes wide with surprise before settling into wariness. She was younger than he had estimated from a distance, perhaps 23 or 24, with a delicate face that showed the strain of recent hardship. Her black morning dress was worn but clean, and he noticed that the hem had been mended multiple times with careful stitches. "I talked to them," she said quietly, returning her attention to the flowers as she finished watering them. "My grandmother used to say that plants grow better when you give them your words along with water and sunlight. I do not know if it is true, but it gives me something to do with all the things I cannot say to anyone else." Owen nodded, moving to stand near his own wife's grave a few yards away. He placed his hat back on his head and looked down at the stone marker he had paid dearly to have carved with Margaret's name and dates. "I understand that feeling more than I can express. Sometimes I come up here and talk to my wife about the cattle, about the weather, about all the mundane things she used to listen to when she was alive. I know she cannot hear me, but it brings a measure of comfort anyway. How long has it been for you?" Delilah asked, rising to her feet and brushing the dirt from her skirt. She picked up the empty pitcher and held it against her chest like a shield. 2 years this past April," Owen replied, his voice carrying the kind of steadiness that came from having worked through the worst of his grief. "The first year I thought I might follow her into the ground. The second year, I learned that life continues whether we want it to or not. I am Owen Kearney. I run the Double K Ranch about 5 miles west of town." "Delilah Harper," she responded, offering him a small nod of acknowledgement. "My husband was Thomas Harper. He worked in the Lucky Strike mine until the accident in February. We had only been married 8 months. The rancher felt a surge of sympathy for this young widow. 8 months was hardly any time at all, and she was so young to be facing the rest of her life alone. "I am truly sorry for your loss, Mrs. Harper." I knew Thomas slightly. He was a good man who worked hard and treated everyone fairly. The mine owners should have shored up those tunnels better. That collapse never should have happened. Delilah's expression flickered with anger and grief mixed together in equal measure. They were warned by several of the miners that the supports were failing, but the owners cared more about extracting ore quickly than about the safety of the men working below ground. Thomas wrote me a letter the night before he died, telling me he was worried about the creaking sounds he kept hearing in the shaft. I found it in his lunch pail when they brought his belongings back to me. "That is criminal," Owen said, his jaw tightening. Those men had families, had lives that mattered. Greed is a terrible disease that infects the hearts of too many people in positions of power. They stood in companionable silence for a few moments, two people connected by the common thread of loss and the understanding that came with it. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of pine and the distant smell of wood smoke from the town below. Evening was approaching, and the temperature would drop quickly once the sun disappeared behind the mountains. "You have family in Black Hawk, Mrs. Harper?" Owen asked, genuinely concerned about this young woman's welfare. He knew how difficult it could be for a widow in a mining town, especially one without resources or connections. "No," Delilah said quietly, her gaze drifting across the cemetery toward the town. "Thomas and I came here from Missouri last year, hoping to make our fortune like so many others. My parents died of fever when I was 16, and I have no siblings. Thomas was all I had, and now I have nothing but a rented room above the general store and a job washing dishes at the hotel restaurant that barely pays enough to cover my rent and food." Owen felt something stirring in his chest, a combination of compassion and something else he was not quite ready to name. This woman was alone in the world, struggling to survive in a town that chewed up and spit out people without resources or protection. He knew what it was like to face each day alone, to eat meals in silence, to wake in the night with no one to reach for in the darkness. "I find myself in need of help at the ranch," he said slowly, the words forming even as the idea took shape in his mind. "My housekeeper left last month to move to Denver with her daughter, and I have been managing on my own since then. The house is falling into disarray, and I am spending so much time trying to keep up with cooking and cleaning that I am neglecting work that needs to be done with the cattle and the land. Would you consider taking the position? It comes with room and board, and I can pay you $30 a month, which I believe is more than you are earning washing dishes." Delilah turned to look at him fully, her expression a mixture of surprise, hope, and caution. "Mr. Kearney, I appreciate the offer, but I would not want to damage your reputation or my own. A widow and a widower living under the same roof without proper chaperone would cause talk in town." "I have thought of that," Owen said, though in truth the idea had only just occurred to him moments before. "My ranch hand, Samuel, and his wife Clara live in a cabin on the property. Clara could serve as your chaperone, and her presence would satisfy any concerns about propriety. I am offering you honest work for honest pay, Mrs. Harper, nothing more. You would have your own room, your own space, and I would treat you with the respect you deserve." She studied him for a long moment, those green eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Owen held her gaze steadily, letting her see that he was sincere in his offer. He was not a young man anymore at 34, and he had learned that honesty and directness served better than games or manipulation. "Why are you doing this?" Delilah asked finally. "You do not know me at all." "Because I know what it is like to be alone," Owen replied simply. "Because I know what it is like to struggle through each day wondering if there is any purpose left to life. Because I see a person who needs help, and I am in a position to offer it. If you prefer to stay in town washing dishes, I will respect that choice. But if you want a chance at something different, something that might offer you a bit of breathing room to figure out what comes next in your life, then the offer stands." Delilah looked down at the grave of her husband, her lips moving silently as if she were asking him for guidance. Owen waited patiently, understanding that this was not a decision to be made lightly. Moving to a ranch to work for a stranger was a significant step, one that required trust and courage. "I would need to give notice at the hotel," Delilah said finally, looking back up at him. "And I would want to meet Clara and Samuel before I agree, to make sure they are comfortable with the arrangement as well." "That is more than reasonable," Owen agreed, feeling an unexpected lightness in his chest at her tentative acceptance. "I need to pick up supplies in town tomorrow morning. I could bring Clara with me, and you could meet her at the general store around 10 o'clock if that suits you. If you all feel comfortable after speaking together, then you could give your notice at the hotel and plan to move out to the ranch on Saturday. That would give you a few days to prepare." "Saturday would work," Delilah said, nodding slowly. "I do not have many possessions to pack. Most of what Thomas and I owned together was sold to pay for his funeral and the debts he had accumulated at the company store." Owen felt another surge of anger at the mining companies that trapped workers in cycles of debt through their overpriced stores and dangerous working conditions, but he kept his feelings from showing on his face. "Then we have an agreement, pending everyone's approval tomorrow. I should let you finish your visit here in peace. I will see you at the general store at 10 o'clock. "Thank you, Mr. Kearney," Delilah said quietly. "I do not know if I believe in providence or fate anymore, but perhaps there are still small mercies in this world." "Perhaps there are," Owen agreed. He tipped his hat to her respectfully and moved toward his own wife's grave to spend a few minutes in his usual one-sided conversation before heading back to his horse. As he knelt beside Margaret's headstone, he found himself speaking more honestly than he had in months. "I know you would approve of this, Maggie. You always had a soft heart for people in need. This is not about replacing you or forgetting you. It is just about trying to do something decent in a world that often feels devoid of decency. I hope you understand." The only answer was the wind through the pine trees and the distant call of a crow, but Owen felt a sense of peace settle over him anyway. He rose to his feet, dusted off his knees, and headed down the hill to where his horse was tied to a fence post near the cemetery entrance. As he mounted and turned toward home, he glanced back once to see Delilah still standing beside her husband's grave, her head bowed and her lips moving in silent conversation. The ride back to the Double K Ranch took him through open grassland dotted with cattle bearing his brand. The sun had fully set by the time he reached the main house, a sturdy two-story structure built of logs and stone that he and his father had constructed 15 years earlier. It had been a wedding gift for Margaret, a place where they had planned to raise a large family and build a life together. But consumption had stolen those dreams, taking Margaret before they had been blessed with children, and leaving Owen alone in a house that felt far too large and empty. Samuel was in the barn tending to the horses when Owen arrived. The ranch hand was a few years younger than Owen, a capable man who had worked the Double K for 8 years and knew the operation nearly as well as Owen himself. His wife Clara helped with cooking and occasional housework, though they maintained their own household in the cabin that sat a quarter-mile from the main house. "Evening, boss," Samuel called out as Owen led his horse into the barn. "How were things in town?" "Quiet," Owen replied, beginning to remove his horse's saddle. "But I may have found a solution to our housekeeping situation. There is a young widow named Delilah Harper who is struggling to make ends meet in town. I offered her the position that Mrs. Murray left vacant. She wants to meet Clara first before making a final decision. Samuel paused in his work of brushing down one of the work horses. A widow, you say? How young is young? 23 or 24, I would estimate, Owen said, hearing the caution in his ranch hand's voice. She lost her husband in the Lucky Strike collapse 3 months ago. She has no family and is barely surviving on what she earns washing dishes at the hotel. I am offering her honest work for honest pay, Samuel. Nothing improper. I was not suggesting otherwise, Samuel said carefully. I just want to make sure you have thought this through. Town folk will talk regardless of the circumstances, and I would not want to see either of you hurt by gossip. Which is why I want Clara to serve as chaperone, Owen explained. Mrs. Harper was concerned about the same thing. She seems like a decent woman who is simply trying to survive in difficult circumstances. I thought we could help her while solving our own problem of keeping the house in order. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. Clara will be happy to meet her. She was just saying yesterday how worried she is about you living alone in that big house with no one to make sure you are eating properly or taking care of yourself. When do you want them to meet? Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at the general store, Owen said. I will bring Clara into town with me when I go to pick up supplies. If everyone feels comfortable with the arrangement, Mrs. Harper will give notice at the hotel and move out here on Saturday. Sounds reasonable, Samuel agreed. I will let Clara know tonight. She will probably spend the rest of the evening planning meals and organizing the house to make sure everything is proper and welcoming. Owen smiled slightly at that. Clara was indeed the type to ensure every detail was attended to. I appreciate you both being understanding about this. I know it is an unusual situation, but it feels like the right thing to do. Sometimes the right thing and the unusual thing are one and the same, Samuel observed. You are a good man, Owen. You see someone in need and you help. That is nothing to apologize for or question. After finishing with his horse and discussing some business matters regarding the cattle with Samuel, Owen made his way to the main house. Inside, the evidence of his bachelor existence was apparent in the dishes stacked in the kitchen, the dust gathering on surfaces, and the general air of neglect that came from a man too tired and too lonely to care much about his surroundings. He lit a lamp and made himself a simple meal of beans and bread, eating alone at the large dining table that had once hosted Margaret's dinner parties and family gatherings. The silence of the house pressed in on him as it did every evening, a reminder of everything he had lost and everything that would never be. But tonight, for the first time in many months, Owen felt a small spark of something that might have been hope. Perhaps having another person in the house would help dispel some of the loneliness. Perhaps helping someone else would give him a sense of purpose beyond the endless cycle of ranch work. And perhaps, in some small way, Margaret was watching over him still, guiding him toward choices that might lead to healing. He cleaned his dishes, banked the fire, and climbed the stairs to his bedroom. Before sleeping, he stood at the window looking out over his land, thinking about the young widow in the cemetery and wondering what tomorrow would bring. The next morning dawned clear and cool, as September mornings often did in the Colorado mountains. Owen rose early, completed his morning chores, and hitched up his wagon for the trip to town. He stopped at Samuel and Clara's cabin to collect Clara, who was ready and waiting with a basket of fresh eggs to sell at the general store. Clara was a plump, cheerful woman of about 30, with kind eyes and a practical manner. She climbed into the wagon beside Owen and immediately began asking questions about Delilah Harper. Samuel told me you met her at the cemetery, Clara said as they started down the road toward Black Hawk. The poor thing, losing her husband so soon after marriage. Do you know anything else about her circumstances? Not much, Owen admitted. She seems intelligent and well-spoken. She mentioned that she and her husband came from Missouri last year hoping to make their fortune. She has been managing on her own since his death, but it is clearly a struggle. When I offered her the position, she was concerned about propriety, which suggests to me that she is a respectable woman who cares about her reputation. That is a good sign, Clara agreed. I am glad you thought to include me in this arrangement. It would indeed cause talk if the two of you were living alone together, especially since you are both still young enough to attract that kind of gossip. This way, everything is above board and proper. They reached Black Hawk by 9:45, and Owen parked the wagon near the general store. The town was busy with morning activity, miners heading to their shifts, women doing their shopping, and children running through the streets playing games. Owen helped Clara down from the wagon and they entered the store together, where the proprietor greeted them warmly. "Morning, Mr. Kearney, Mrs. Walsh," the storekeeper said. "What can I do for you today?" "I have my regular order to pick up," Owen replied, "but I am also meeting someone here at 10 o'clock. A young woman named Delilah Harper." The storekeeper's expression shifted slightly. "Mrs. Harper, yes. She rents the room upstairs from me. Quiet woman, always pays her rent on time even though I know money is tight for her. She came down earlier and said she had an important meeting this morning. She should be along shortly." As if on cue, the door opened and Delilah entered. She was wearing the same black morning dress from the previous day, but she had clearly taken extra care with her appearance. Her hair was neatly arranged, and there was a touch of color in her cheeks that suggested she had been nervous about this meeting. "Mr. Kearney," she said, nodding to him before turning her attention to Clara. "You must be Mrs. Walsh." "Please call me Clara," the older woman said warmly, stepping forward to take Delilah's hands in her own. "Owen has told me about your situation, and I want you to know that you would be most welcome at the ranch. I know how difficult it is to be a woman alone in this world, and I would be honored to serve as your companion and friend." Some of the tension in Delilah's shoulders eased at Clara's friendly manner. "That is very kind of you to say. I must confess I hardly slept last night worrying about this meeting. The offer is so generous that I kept thinking there must be some catch, some hidden complication I was not seeing." "No catch," Owen assured her. "Just honest work for honest pay and the company of decent people. The ranch is a good place, Mrs. Harper. It can be isolated at times, but there is a peacefulness to it that I think you might find healing." Clara pulled Delilah over to a quiet corner of the store where they could talk more privately. Owen busied himself with his supply order, giving the women space to get to know each other. He could hear the murmur of their conversation, Clara's warm tones mixing with Delilah's quieter voice, and occasionally he caught the sound of soft laughter. After about 20 minutes, Clara and Delilah returned to where Owen was loading supplies into a crate. "I think this arrangement will work very well," Clara announced. "Delilah and I have discussed the details, and I am confident that we will all get along splendidly. She will have the large bedroom on the second floor at the front of the house. I will come by daily to ensure propriety is maintained, and we have agreed on her duties and schedule. I am going to give my notice at the hotel right now," Delilah added, her green eyes showing cautious optimism. "They will not be pleased to lose even a dishwasher with so little warning, but I cannot pass up this opportunity. If it is still acceptable to you, Mr. Kearney, I will be ready to move to the ranch on Saturday morning." "That is perfectly acceptable," Owen agreed. "I will come to town with the wagon on Saturday at 8 o'clock to help you transport your belongings." "Does that time work for you?" "It does," Delilah confirmed. "Thank you again, Mr. Kearney, and Clara, I am truly grateful for your kindness and understanding. This feels like a door opening when I thought all doors were closed to me." Sometimes that is exactly how providence works, Clara said gently. When one door closes, another opens, but we have to have the courage to walk through it. Owen finished loading his supplies while Delilah excused herself to go to the hotel. Clara helped him secure everything in the wagon, and they began the journey back to the ranch. "She is a sweet girl," Clara said once they were on the road. "Very young to have experienced so much loss. I can see the grief in her eyes, but there is also a strength there. I think she will do well at the ranch, and I think it will be good for you too, Owen. That house has been too empty for too long." "I hope you are right," Owen replied. "I just want to help someone who needs it." Nothing more complicated than that. Clara gave him a knowing look, but said nothing more on the subject. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, watching the landscape roll by and breathing in the clean mountain air. The next 2 days passed quickly as Owen prepared the house for Delilah's arrival. He cleaned the bedroom that would be hers, making sure everything was in good repair. Clara came by with fresh linens and curtains, adding feminine touches that the room had lacked. Samuel repaired a loose floorboard on the stairs and fixed a sticky window in the kitchen. On Saturday morning, Owen rose before dawn and completed his essential chores before hitching up the wagon for the trip to town. The day was overcast, with clouds threatening rain, and he hoped they would make it back to the ranch before the weather broke. He arrived at the general store promptly at 8 o'clock and found Delilah waiting outside with 2 small trunks and a carpetbag that apparently contained all her worldly possessions. She was still in morning black, but she had added a shawl against the morning chill. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper," Owen greeted her, jumping down from the wagon. "Are you ready to start your new position?" "I am," Delilah replied, and he could hear the mix of nervousness and determination in her voice. "I gave my notice at the hotel, settled my account with the storekeeper, and said goodbye to the few acquaintances I had in town. Everything I own is right here." Owen loaded her trunks into the wagon bed, noting how light they were. She truly had almost nothing. He helped her up onto the wagon seat and they started out of town, heading west toward the ranch. "Tell me about the ranch," Delilah said as they drove. "What will my duties entail?" "The house needs general upkeep," Owen explained. "Cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, and anything else that needs doing. Clara will help when she can, but she has her own household to manage. I am usually up before dawn to tend the cattle and other ranch work, and I am often not back to the house until dusk. I generally take my noon meal out on the range, so you would need to prepare breakfast and dinner daily, along with something I can pack for midday." "That sounds manageable," Delilah said. "I grew up helping my mother with all those tasks, and I kept house for Thomas during our marriage. Cooking for one is easier than cooking for a mining crew, which is what the hotel kitchen felt like." They talked more as they traveled, Owen pointing out landmarks and explaining the workings of the ranch. Delilah asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely interested in learning about her new home. As they drew closer to the ranch, the clouds began to break apart, allowing sunlight to stream through in brilliant shafts that illuminated the grasslands. "It is beautiful here," Delilah said softly, looking out across the open country. "So different from the cramped streets of Black Hawk, where everything smells like ore dust and smoke." "It is my favorite place on earth," Owen admitted. "My father bought this land when I was a boy, and I have spent most of my life working it. Every rock and tree and stream is familiar to me. I hope you will come to love it as I do." They arrived at the ranch house mid-morning. Clara was waiting for them, along with Samuel, who helped carry Delilah's trunks inside and up to her room. Clara had prepared a late breakfast, and the 4 of them sat down together to eat and discuss the arrangements in more detail. Your room is at the front of the house with a nice view of the mountains, Clara explained to Delilah. Owen's room is at the back of the house on the same floor, and there is a spare bedroom that is currently used for storage. The kitchen is well equipped, and there is a good root cellar for keeping food fresh. I have written down some of Owen's preferences for meals, but he is not particular and will be grateful for whatever you prepare. I am not a difficult man to please, Owen confirmed. I have been living on beans and bacon for the past month, so anything more elaborate than that will be a welcome change. Delilah smiled slightly at that, the first genuine smile Owen had seen from her. It transformed her face, making her look younger and less burdened. I think I can manage better than beans and bacon, Mr. Kearney. After breakfast, Clara took Delilah on a tour of the house and outbuildings, showing her where everything was kept and explaining the various systems Owen had set up. Owen returned to his ranch work, leaving the women to handle the domestic arrangements. That evening, he returned to the house to find it transformed. The kitchen was clean and organized, delicious smells were coming from the stove, and there were fresh flowers in a vase on the dining table. Delilah was stirring something in a pot, her sleeves rolled up and a white apron protecting her black dress. "Welcome home," she said when he entered. "Dinner will be ready in about 15 minutes. There is water heating if you would like to wash up." Owen felt an unexpected emotion tighten his throat. The simple phrase, "welcome home," spoken by another person in this house, made it feel lived in again rather than just a structure he inhabited. He washed up at the basin and changed out of his work clothes before returning to the dining room. Delilah had prepared a meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, carrots, and fresh bread. It was more food and more variety than Owen had eaten in a single meal in months. They sat down together at opposite ends of the long table, and for a moment, silence stretched between them awkwardly. "This looks wonderful," Owen finally said. "You are clearly a talented cook." "My mother taught me well," Delilah replied. "She always said that a good meal could comfort the soul as much as feed the body. I found that to be true after Thomas died. Cooking gave me something to focus on other than my grief." They ate in companionable quiet for a while before Owen asked, "How do you find the house? Is everything to your satisfaction?" "It is lovely," Delilah said sincerely. "Much larger and more comfortable than anywhere I have lived in a long time. The bedroom is beautiful and I am grateful for the privacy and space. Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Kearney. I know I said that before, but I truly mean it." "You are welcome," Owen replied. "And please, when it is just the two of us, you can call me Owen. Mr. Kearney makes me feel like my father." Delilah considered this for a moment before nodding. "Then you should call me Delilah. Mrs. Harper makes me feel like an old woman and I am only 24. As the days turned into weeks, a comfortable routine developed at the ranch. Delilah proved to be an excellent housekeeper, keeping everything clean and organized while preparing meals that were both delicious and economical. She was quiet and kept mostly to herself, but occasionally, Owen would find her standing at a window staring out at the mountains with an expression of such profound sadness that it hurt his heart. He understood that grief, carried it himself, and so he gave her space to work through her emotions. They conversed politely during meals, but otherwise maintained a respectful distance. Clara came by several times a week, often sharing afternoon tea with Delilah and slowly drawing the younger woman out of her shell. About a month after Delilah's arrival, Owen came back to the house one afternoon to find her in the kitchen garden, on her knees in the dirt with tears streaming down her face. She was pulling weeds with almost violent intensity, her hands moving quickly and her shoulders shaking. He approached carefully, not wanting to startle her. "Delilah, what is wrong?" She looked up at him, her face wet with tears and dirt smudged on her cheek. "Today is the day Thomas proposed to me 1 year ago. We were walking along a creek near our home in Missouri, and he picked wildflowers for me and asked me to be his wife. I was so happy that day. I thought we would have a lifetime together. And now he is gone and I am here, and I feel guilty for being alive when he is dead. I feel guilty for not crying every day anymore. I feel guilty for enjoying the sunrise this morning and for laughing at something Clara said yesterday. How can I go on living when he cannot?" Owen knelt down beside her in the dirt, his own grief rising to meet hers. "I understand exactly what you are feeling. When Margaret died, I felt guilty every time I enjoyed a meal or appreciated a beautiful day or found myself smiling at something. It felt like a betrayal to go on living when she could not. But eventually, I realized that she would not have wanted me to stop living. She would have wanted me to find whatever happiness I could in this world. Your Thomas would want the same for you." "How do you know that?" Delilah asked, her voice breaking. "How do you know what he would want?" "Because anyone who truly loves someone wants them to be happy, even if that happiness must eventually exist without them," Owen said gently. "The love you had for Thomas does not disappear just because you laugh or smile or find moments of peace. It lives on in your heart, in your memories, in the way his love shaped who you are. Honoring his memory does not mean drowning in sorrow forever." Delilah covered her face with her dirty hands and sobbed. Owen sat beside her in the garden, not touching her but present, letting her release the grief that had been building. The sun moved across the sky, birds sang in the nearby trees, and life continued around them while she wept. Finally, her tears began to slow. She wiped her face with her apron, leaving more dirt streaks, and took several shaky breaths. "I am sorry you had to see that. I try to keep my emotions private." "Please do not apologize," Owen said firmly. "Grief is nothing to be ashamed of. It is the price we pay for having loved deeply. I am honored that you felt safe enough to express it honestly rather than hiding it away." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. "You truly do understand, do you not? This is not just empty words of comfort. You have walked this same path." "I have," Owen confirmed. "And I am still walking it, though the way gets easier with time. The pain never completely disappears, but it becomes something you can carry without it crushing you." They sat together in the garden for a while longer, not speaking, just sharing the space and the understanding that came from parallel losses. When they finally rose and returned to the house, something had changed between them. A wall had come down, a connection had formed, and they were no longer just employer and employee sharing a house. They were two wounded souls who recognized each other's pain and offered the comfort of companionship. After that day, their conversations became deeper and more personal. During evening meals, they began to share stories about their lost spouses, keeping their memories alive through words and laughter and sometimes tears. Owen learned about Thomas's love of music and his dream of someday opening a store of his own. Delilah learned about Margaret's gift for gardening and her volunteer work with the church helping families in need. As October arrived, and the aspen trees turned brilliant gold across the mountainsides, Owen found himself looking forward to returning to the house each evening. Delilah's presence had transformed it from a lonely structure filled with ghosts into a home again. The sound of her singing while she worked, the smell of fresh bread baking, the sight of curtains she had made hanging in the windows, all these things brought warmth and life back to a place that had felt cold and dead. One evening, as they sat together after dinner drinking coffee, Delilah said quietly, "I visited Thomas's grave last Thursday and found myself telling him about the ranch, about you, about how I am beginning to feel happy again. I hope he understands. I hope he knows I will always love him, but that I need to keep living. I am certain he understands, Owen said. Just as I am certain Margaret understands when I talk to her about you, about how grateful I am that you came into my life and brought light back to this house. Delilah met his eyes across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. It was too soon, they both knew, but there was an awareness now, a recognition that the connection they felt might eventually become something more than shared grief and companionship. November brought early snow to the high country, and Owen began spending more time working closer to the house, preparing the ranch for winter. One particularly cold morning, he came in for the midday meal to find Delilah struggling with the cast iron stove, which had apparently stopped drawing properly and was filling the kitchen with smoke. "Let me look at it," he said, immediately assessing the problem. He climbed up on a chair to check the stovepipe and found a bird's nest blocking the flue. "This is the culprit. Must have been built during the summer, and I never noticed because we were not using the stove much in hot weather." He cleared the blockage and adjusted the damper, and soon the stove was working properly again. When he climbed down from the chair, he found Delilah standing close by, looking up at him with an expression that made his breath catch. "Thank you," she said softly, "for this, and for everything. You saved me, Owen. When you approached me in the cemetery that day, I was at the end of my resources and my hope. I do not know what would have become of me if you had not offered me this position." "You saved me too," Owen replied, acutely aware of how close she was standing, how he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "This house was a tomb before you arrived. I was just going through the motions of living, not really alive at all. You brought it back to life." "You brought me back to life." They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Owen could feel himself leaning toward her, drawn by something stronger than logic or propriety. But then Delilah stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I am not ready," she whispered. "I want to be, but I am not yet." "I know," Owen said, his heart pounding. "Neither am I, not really. We are still healing, both of us. There is no rush. We have time." But even as he said it, he knew that something had irrevocably shifted between them. The awareness was there now, acknowledged if not acted upon. They cared for each other in a way that went beyond friendship or employer and employee. Where it might lead, neither of them could say, but the possibility hung in the air like the first snow of winter, beautiful and a little frightening. As winter deepened, the ranch settled into a quiet rhythm. Owen worked with his cattle, moving them to protected valleys and ensuring they had adequate feed. Samuel and Clara remained steady presences, their friendship and support a blessing to both Owen and Delilah. The four of them celebrated a modest Thanksgiving together, with Delilah preparing a feast that reminded Owen of holidays past when his family had gathered around this same table. Christmas approached, and Delilah spent several evenings making decorations for the house, stringing popcorn and crafting ornaments from bits of cloth and ribbon. Owen dragged in a small pine tree and set it up in the parlor, and together they decorated it while snow fell softly outside the windows. "I did not think I would ever feel festive again," Delilah admitted as she tied a ribbon bow to a branch. "Last Christmas, Thomas was still alive and we were planning our future together. This year, everything is different. But there is still beauty in the world, still reasons to celebrate, and I am learning to hold both grief and gratitude in my heart at the same time." "That is wisdom that takes some people a lifetime to learn," Owen observed. "You are remarkable, Delilah, stronger than you give yourself credit for." She smiled at him, that transformative smile that made her whole face glow. "I learned from watching you. You carry your grief with such dignity, never letting it make you bitter or hard. You channel it into care for your land, kindness toward others, and living with integrity. That is the kind of strength I want to embody. On Christmas morning, they exchanged small gifts. Owen had commissioned a beautiful shawl from a weaver in town, knowing that Delilah had admired it when they had gone for supplies. She was delighted with it, wrapping it around her shoulders immediately. "It is too fine a gift," she protested, even as she clearly loved it. "I did not spend nearly this much on your present." "It is not about the money," Owen said. "It is about seeing something that would bring you joy and wanting to give it to you." Delilah handed him a wrapped package tied with twine. Inside, he found a new pair of leather gloves she had made herself, carefully stitched and lined with soft wool. They fit perfectly, and he was touched by the time and effort she had clearly put into creating them. "They are perfect," he said honestly. "I will treasure them. Thank you." They spent a quiet Christmas day together, cooking and eating and playing cards by the fire. It felt natural and comfortable, like they had been doing this for years rather than months. When evening came and they sat in the parlor watching the firelight dance, Owen found himself thinking that he had not felt this content since before Margaret's death. "I am glad you are here," he said into the peaceful silence. "I cannot imagine this house without you anymore." "I am glad I am here too," Delilah replied. "This ranch has become home to me in a way I did not expect. I thought I would always feel like a guest, like I was temporarily occupying space that did not belong to me. But it does not feel that way anymore. It feels like I belong here." "You do belong here," Owen said with quiet intensity. "You absolutely do." The new year of 1879 arrived with bitter cold and heavy snowfall that kept them close to the house for days at a time. Owen had to dig paths through the drifts to reach the barn and ensure the animals were cared for. But otherwise, he spent more time indoors than he typically would in winter. The forced proximity meant more time with Delilah, more conversations that stretched late into the evenings, more shared laughter and comfortable silences. They discovered common interests in books and music. Delilah played the old piano in the parlor that had belonged to Margaret, filling the house with melodies that stirred something deep in Owen's chest. One night during a particularly fierce blizzard, they sat together on the sofa in front of the fire. A thick quilt draped over both of them as protection against the drafts that crept through even the best sealed windows. They had been reading aloud from a novel, taking turns with chapters, but had fallen into companionable silence as the storm howled outside. "You think it is possible to love more than once?" Delilah asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Truly love, I mean. Not just affection or companionship, but the deep, soul-level love that changes who you are." Owen considered the question carefully before answering. "I think the heart has a greater capacity than we give it credit for. Loving again does not diminish what we felt before. It is not a betrayal or a replacement. It is simply proof that we are still alive, still capable of connection and hope and all the things that make us human. The love I had for Margaret was real and deep and will always be a part of who I am. But I believe I could love again if I allowed myself to, and it would be a different love but no less valid or important." "I have been feeling things," Delilah admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Things I did not expect to feel again, certainly not so soon. I care about you, Owen, in a way that goes beyond gratitude or friendship. When you come in from working outside, my heart lifts at the sight of you. When you smile at me across the dinner table, I feel warm inside. When I think about the future now, I see you in it, and that both thrills and terrifies me." Owen set aside the book and turned to face her fully. In the firelight she was beautiful, her face soft and open and vulnerable. He reached out and gently took her hand, feeling the calluses that had formed from hard work and the delicate bones beneath. "I feel the same way," he confessed. "I have been fighting it because I thought it was too soon, that we both needed more time to heal before opening our hearts again. But the truth is that you have already found your way into my heart, Delilah. You are there, firmly planted, and I do not want to uproot you. I am falling in love with you, and it is different from what I felt for Margaret, but no less real." Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I am falling in love with you too. I fought it, felt guilty about it, tried to convince myself it was just gratitude or the comfort of not being alone. But it is more than that. You see me, truly see me, and you care for me not as a project or a duty, but as a person. You make me want to hope again, to believe in the possibility of happiness." Owen reached up with his free hand and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. "Then let us hope together. Let us move forward slowly but honestly, allowing whatever is growing between us to develop naturally. There is no rush. We have all the time in the world." "All the time in the world," Delilah repeated, leaning into his touch. "That sounds wonderful." They sat together for a long time, holding hands beneath the quilt while the fire burned down to embers and the storm raged outside. No more words were needed. The acknowledgement of their feelings was enough for now, a foundation upon which they could build something lasting. In the weeks that followed, their relationship slowly evolved. They continued to maintain propriety, Clara's presence ensuring that no scandal could touch them, but there was a new warmth between them that was impossible to hide. Samuel and Clara noticed, of course, and privately expressed their approval. "You deserve happiness, Owen," Samuel told him one day while they were mending fence. "Margaret would want you to find love again, to live fully rather than just existing. Delilah is a good woman, and it is clear that you care deeply for each other." "I do care for her," Owen admitted. "More than I thought possible. But I worry sometimes that we are rushing things, that we are both still too raw from our losses to make wise decisions about the future." "Love does not follow timelines," Samuel said wisely. "It comes when it comes, and you can either embrace it or run from it. You have always been a man who faces things head-on rather than running. I would hate to see you change that now out of fear." Owen took those words to heart. He began courting Delilah in earnest, bringing her wildflowers when he found them during his work, reading poetry to her in the evenings, taking her for walks around the ranch when the weather permitted. She responded with her own gestures of affection, making his favorite meals, leaving little notes for him to find, playing piano pieces she knew he loved. As spring arrived and the snow melted, revealing the green grass and blooming wildflowers beneath, Owen knew it was time to take the next step. He had loved once and lost, and the pain of that loss had nearly broken him. But he had survived, had healed enough to love again, and he was not going to let fear keep him from claiming the happiness that was within his reach. One evening in late April, he asked Delilah to walk with him after dinner. They strolled through the pastures as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The cattle grazed peacefully nearby, and birds sang their evening songs. "It has been almost a year since I first saw you in the cemetery," Owen said as they walked. "You were watering flowers on your husband's grave, and I understood the grief that drove you there because I carried the same grief. I offered you a new beginning here at the ranch, thinking I was simply helping someone in need. But you have given me so much more than I ever gave you. You brought my house back to life. You brought me back to life. You did the same for me," Delilah said softly. "I was drowning in despair when you found me. This ranch, this life we have built together, has been a healing place for my soul." Owen stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I know it has not been a full year since Thomas died. I know that society would say it is too soon for you to consider moving forward. But I also know that life is unpredictable and short, and when we find something precious, we should hold on to it. Delilah Harper, I love you with my whole heart. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Delilah's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Owen Kearney, I will marry you. I love you with everything I am, and I want to spend the rest of my life building a future with you. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close as relief and joy washed over him. She fit perfectly against him, her head tucked beneath his chin, and he felt as though all the broken pieces of his heart were finally knitting back together. We will do this properly, he said. I will go into town tomorrow and speak with the preacher. We will have a simple wedding with Samuel and Clara as witnesses. I want you to have a wedding ring and a proper ceremony, even if it is modest. I do not need anything elaborate, Delilah assured him. I just need you, and this life we are creating together. Everything else is just window dressing. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Black Hawk. Delilah wore a simple cream-colored dress that Clara had helped her make, and Owen wore his best suit. Samuel and Clara stood beside them, beaming with pride and happiness. A handful of townspeople attended, including the doctor, the storekeeper, and a few of the ranching families from the surrounding area. As Owen slipped a gold band onto Delilah's finger and promised to love and cherish her until death parted them again, he felt the weight of his past losses begin to lift. Margaret would always hold a place in his heart, and he knew Thomas would always be important to Delilah, but they were moving forward now, creating something new from the ashes of their grief. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, with Clara and several neighbor women helping to prepare a feast. Music and laughter filled the house, and for the first time in years, Owen felt true joy bubbling up inside him. As he danced with his new wife in the parlor, her green eyes shining up at him with love and hope, he silently thanked whatever power had guided his steps to that cemetery almost a year ago. That night, after the guests had departed and the house was quiet, Owen and Delilah stood together at the window of what was now their shared bedroom, looking out over the moonlit ranch. "Are you happy?" Owen asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I am," Delilah replied, leaning back against his chest. "I am happier than I thought I would ever be again. You have given me a second chance at life and love, and I promise I will spend every day trying to be worthy of that gift." "You are already worthy," Owen murmured against her hair. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I will spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." They stood together in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts, but connected by the bonds of love and commitment they had forged. Finally, they turned from the window and toward each other, ready to begin this new chapter of their lives together. The months that followed were filled with the hard work of running a ranch and the quiet joys of marriage. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and retiring to each other's arms at night. The loneliness that had haunted both of them was replaced by partnership and companionship. In early autumn, Delilah realized she was carrying their first child. She was nervous about telling Owen, worried that he might see it as a betrayal of Margaret's memory since he and his first wife had never been blessed with children. But when she finally worked up the courage to share the news one evening after dinner, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "A baby," he breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "We are going to have a baby, we are," Delilah confirmed, watching his face carefully. "I know this might be difficult for you, given that you and Margaret never had children together. I understand if you have complicated feelings about it." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "My feelings are not complicated at all. I am overjoyed, Delilah. This child is a gift, a blessing, a sign that life continues and grows even after loss. Yes, I wish Margaret could have experienced motherhood. Yes, there is a bittersweet edge to this happiness because she is not here to share it. But that does not diminish my excitement and gratitude. We are going to be parents, and that is a miracle." Delilah cried tears of relief and happiness against his chest. "I was so afraid you would be upset or conflicted. I should have known you would handle this with the same grace you handle everything else." As the pregnancy progressed, Owen treated Delilah like precious porcelain, insisting she rest more and work less. She tolerated his fussing with patient amusement, knowing it came from a place of love and care. Clara was a constant presence, helping with the heavier household tasks and sharing advice from her own experience with pregnancy. The winter was long but passed more quickly than any winter Owen had experienced in recent memory. Having Delilah by his side, watching her body change and grow as their child developed, filled him with purpose and hope. He prepared the spare bedroom as a nursery, building a cradle with his own hands and whitewashing the walls until they gleamed. In the early spring of 1880, Delilah went into labor on a warm April afternoon. Clara sent Samuel racing for the doctor while she stayed with Delilah, coaching her through the contractions. Owen paced the floor downstairs, feeling helpless and terrified. The sounds of Delilah's cries drifting down from the bedroom above tore at his heart, and he prayed harder than he ever had in his life that both mother and child would survive. After what felt like an eternity, but was actually only about 6 hours, the thin wail of an infant filled the house. Owen froze, his heart pounding, until Clara appeared at the top of the stairs with a huge smile on her face. "It is a boy," she announced. "A healthy, perfect boy, and Delilah came through beautifully. You can come up now." Owen took the stairs 3 at a time and burst into the bedroom. Delilah was propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion, but she was smiling radiantly as she held a small bundle in her arms. The doctor was packing up his instruments, looking pleased with the outcome. "Come meet your son," Delilah said softly, her eyes shining with tears and love. Owen approached the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the tiny red-faced infant his wife cradled. The baby's eyes were scrunched closed, his little fists waving in the air, and Owen felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Owen whispered, reaching out to gently touch one of those tiny fists. The baby's fingers immediately wrapped around his own finger, gripping with surprising strength. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Delilah asked. "We discussed several options, but now that he is here, I want you to choose." Owen thought for a moment, then said, "What about James?" "James Thomas Kearney, honoring your first husband who gave you so much even though his time with you was brief." Fresh tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks. "That is beautiful and generous, Owen. Yes, James Thomas is perfect." They spent the next hour marveling at their son while the doctor provided instructions for his care, and Clara bustled about making sure Delilah had everything she needed. Samuel appeared with congratulations and a carved wooden rattle he had made in anticipation of the birth. As evening fell and the house quieted, Owen sat beside the bed holding his son while Delilah dozed. He looked down at the sleeping infant and felt overwhelmed by the responsibility and privilege of fatherhood. This tiny person was depending on him and Delilah to keep him safe, to raise him right, to give him a good life. "I promise I will be the best father I know how to be," Owen whispered to the sleeping baby. "I will teach you about this land. about integrity and hard work and treating people with respect. I will tell you about your mother's first husband, the man who helped shape who she is. And I will tell you about my first wife, the woman who taught me about love and loss. You come from a legacy of love, little James, and that is a precious thing. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, but also profound joy as they watched James grow and develop. Delilah proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving even when exhausted. Owen discovered depths of tenderness in himself he had not known existed, spending hours just watching his son sleep or playing with him on a blanket in the parlor. As James approached his first birthday, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, there was no nervousness about sharing the news, only excitement as they anticipated expanding their family further. "I hope it is a girl this time," Delilah said one evening as they sat together on the porch watching James toddle around the yard under Clara's watchful eye. "I would love to have a daughter to balance out our son." "Whatever we have will be perfect," Owen replied, pulling her close. "Boy or girl, this child will be loved and wanted and treasured. Just like James, just like any other children we might be blessed with in the future. Listen to us, planning a large family," Delilah said with a laugh. "2 years ago, we were both drowning in grief, thinking our lives were essentially over. Now look at us." "Now look at us indeed," Owen agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You were watering flowers on a grave when I first saw you, tending to your memories and your loss. I understood that grief because I carried my own. I offered you new beginnings, but you gave me new beginnings too. We saved each other, Delilah." "We did," she agreed softly. "And we built something beautiful from our pain. A home, a family, a future filled with hope instead of despair." Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose after Owen's first wife and the flowers that had been growing on Thomas's grave, was born in the spring of 1881. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, and she completed their family in ways they had not known they needed. As the years passed, the Kearney family grew and thrived. James proved to be a natural with cattle, following his father around the ranch from the time he could walk. Margaret was gentle and thoughtful, with a gift for music that reminded Owen of both his wives. 2 more children arrived in the following years, another son and another daughter, each bringing their own unique personality and gifts to the family. Owen expanded the ranch, buying additional acreage from a neighbor who was retiring. The cattle operation grew, and with it came prosperity and stability. Delilah ran the household with efficiency and grace, creating a home that was always filled with love, laughter, and the noise of children. Samuel and Clara remained close friends, their own family growing as they welcomed 2 daughters. The children from both families grew up together, running wild across the ranch and creating memories that would last a lifetime. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen and Delilah took a rare evening alone together, riding out to a hilltop that overlooked the entire ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and they sat on a blanket watching their cattle graze in the distance. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked, his arm around Delilah's shoulders. "Marrying me, building this life. Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" Delilah looked at him with surprise. "Regret? Owen, how could I regret the best thing that ever happened to me? I love Thomas, and I still carry him in my heart, but what we have built together is precious and valuable and exactly what I needed. You gave me a second chance at happiness when I thought all happiness was lost to me." "You did the same for me," Owen said. "I was just existing before you came into my life, going through the motions without any real purpose or joy. Now I wake up every morning grateful for another day with you and our children." "You are my heart, Delilah," You and Margaret both occupy that space, and there is no conflict in that. Both loves are real, both loves matter, and I am a better man for having experienced both." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Behind them, they could see the lights of their home, where their children were under Clara's supervision for the evening. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Owen could picture the scene inside. Children playing, Clara preparing their supper, the comfortable chaos of family life. "I visited Thomas's grave last week," Delilah said softly. "I brought flowers and told him about the children, about you, about our life. I thanked him for the time we had together, and for teaching me that I was capable of love. And then I said goodbye, truly goodbye, for the first time. Not forgetting him, but releasing the grip of grief that I have carried for so many years. It felt right, like a chapter finally closing so a new one could fully begin." "I did something similar at Margaret's grave a few months ago," Owen admitted. "I brought a flower from our garden, one of the descendants of the roses she planted when we were first married. I told her about you, about how you came into my life and taught me to hope again. I told her about our children and asked for her blessing on our family. I felt her presence there, and I swear I could almost hear her voice telling me she was happy for me, that she wanted me to live fully and love completely." "You think they would have liked each other?" Delilah asked. "Margaret and Thomas, if they had ever met?" Owen considered the question. "I think they would have. They were both good people with generous hearts. I think they would have recognized that quality in each other and become friends." "I like to imagine them somewhere together," Delilah said, "watching over us and our children, satisfied that we found happiness after our losses." "Is that foolish?" "Not foolish at all," Owen assured her. "Whatever brings you comfort and peace is valid and important. I believe in something beyond this life, something where love continues even after death. Whether that is heaven or another plane of existence, or simply the way we carry our loved ones in our hearts, I cannot say. But I do believe Margaret and Thomas would approve of what we have built together." They remained on the hilltop until the sky was fully dark and the temperature began to drop. Then they rode back to the ranch house, to their children and their life, carrying with them the peace that came from having honored their pasts while fully embracing their present and future. The years continued to roll by, marked by the milestones of children growing up, the ranch expanding and prospering, and the deepening love between Owen and Delilah. They faced challenges together, weathering droughts and harsh winters, illness and the normal struggles that come with raising a large family. But they faced everything as partners, supporting each other through difficult times and celebrating together during good times. James grew into a fine young man who eventually took over much of the daily operation of the ranch, allowing Owen to step back slightly and enjoy more time with his family. Margaret developed her musical talents, eventually teaching piano to children from the surrounding ranches and bringing culture and refinement to their rural community. The younger children carved out their own paths, some staying on the ranch and others venturing out to explore the growing opportunities in the West. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration that lasted 3 days. Children and grandchildren filled the house to bursting, and the sound of laughter and conversation was a constant backdrop. Samuel and Clara were there, older now but still vibrant and full of life. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of their community. On the final evening of the celebration, after the guests had departed and the younger grandchildren had been put to bed, Owen and Delilah sat together on the front porch swing they had installed years earlier. The night was warm and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Look at what we built, Delilah said, gesturing toward the house where their family slept. From two broken people in a cemetery to all of this. How did we get so lucky? I do not think it was luck, Owen replied, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. I think it was courage. We had the courage to hope again, to love again, to believe that life could still hold joy even after terrible loss. That courage made all the difference. You had the courage to approach me that day in the cemetery, Delilah reminded him. You could have simply mourned at your own wife's grave and left me to my grief. But you reached out, you offered help, and you changed the trajectory of my entire life. We changed each other's trajectories, Owen corrected gently. This was never about one person saving another. It was about two people recognizing each other's pain and choosing to walk forward together. You gave me just as much as I gave you, probably more. Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder, and they swung gently back and forth in the warm night air. From inside the house came the faint sound of a baby crying, quickly soothed by the baby's mother. Life continued, generation after generation, building on the foundation that Owen and Delilah had created through their courage to love again. If you could go back to that day in the cemetery, Delilah asked, knowing everything that would come after, would you do anything differently? Not a single thing, Owen said firmly. Every choice, every risk, every moment of vulnerability led us to this life we have built. I would not change any of it because I would not risk losing what we have found together. I feel the same way, Delilah agreed. The pain of losing Thomas was terrible, and I would not wish that kind of grief on anyone. But it led me to you, to this ranch, to our children and grandchildren. I carry both the grief and the gratitude, and somehow that feels right. They sat together on the porch until the moon was high in the sky. Two people who had found each other in the darkest moments of their lives and built something beautiful together. The ranch spread out around them, a testament to hard work and perseverance. The house behind them was filled with the family they had created, a living monument to their love and commitment. As Owen helped Delilah to her feet and they walked hand in hand into the house, he thought about all the years that had passed since that day in the Boot Hill Cemetery. He had been a man hollowed out by grief, going through the motions of living without truly being alive. She had been a young widow without resources or hope, tending flowers on her husband's grave, because it was the only thing that gave her any sense of purpose. And then their paths had crossed, and everything had changed. He had understood her grief because he carried his own. She had recognized his loneliness because she felt the same emptiness. Together, they had found the courage to reach for something new, to risk their hearts again despite the pain of previous losses. They had built a life together that honored their pasts while embracing their present and future. The new beginnings Owen had offered that day in the cemetery had blossomed into more than either of them could have imagined. Not because they forgot their first loves or pretended those relationships had not mattered, but because they had the courage to believe that the heart could expand to hold multiple loves, multiple chapters, multiple chances at happiness. As they climbed the stairs to their bedroom, passing the rooms where their children and grandchildren slept, Owen felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. Life had taken so much from both of them, but it had also given them this second chance, this beautiful, chaotic, imperfect family they had created together. He pulled Delilah close as they prepared for bed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for taking a chance on a widowed rancher and his empty house. Thank you for bringing light and love and life back into my world. Thank you for seeing me, Delilah replied, her arms wrapping around his waist. Thank you for understanding my grief without trying to fix it or rush me through it. Thank you for giving me space to heal while also showing me that healing was possible. Thank you for loving me so completely." They held each other for a long moment, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and against considerable odds. The road from that cemetery to this bedroom had been long and sometimes difficult, but they had walked it together, supporting each other through both the struggles and the joys. As they finally settled into bed, Delilah's head resting on Owen's shoulder and his arm wrapped protectively around her, he thought about all the years still ahead of them. They would continue to watch their children grow and thrive. They would welcome more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They would face whatever challenges came their way with the same partnership and commitment that had sustained them through the past 25 years. The ranch would continue to prosper under their guidance and eventually under the management of their children. The house would continue to be filled with love and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family gatherings. And through it all, Owen and Delilah would stand together, two people who had learned that love does not end when someone dies, but rather transforms and grows and finds new expressions. On those Thursday afternoons when either of them felt the pull of memory and grief, they would ride together to the cemetery in Black Hawk. They would stand at the graves of Margaret and Thomas, watering the flowers that still grew there, telling stories and sharing memories. They would honor those first loves while celebrating the love they had found together, because that was the truth they had discovered. The human heart has room for multiple loves, and loving again does not diminish what came before. It simply proves that we are resilient, that we are capable of healing, that we can honor our grief while also embracing joy. As sleep slowly claimed them both, Owen's last conscious thought was of that first moment in the cemetery when he had seen Delilah kneeling beside her husband's grave, watering flowers with such tender devotion. He had understood her grief in that moment because he carried his own. He had offered new beginnings because he recognized that they both needed them. Neither of them could have known then where that simple act of compassion would lead. Neither could have imagined the family they would create, the life they would build, the love they would share. But looking back now, 25 years later, Owen could see the hand of providence or fate or simply the beautiful randomness of life bringing them together at exactly the right moment. She had been watering flowers on a grave. He had been a widowed rancher who understood her pain. He had offered new beginnings, and together they had seized them with both hands, building something remarkable from the ruins of their previous losses. And in the end, that was the story of their lives together. Two wounded people who found each other in the darkest of places and chose hope over despair, love over loneliness, and life over merely existing. They had honored their pasts while fully living their present, creating a legacy that would echo through generations. The ranch would stand long after they were gone, a testament to their hard work and vision. Their children and grandchildren would carry forward the values they had instilled. And somewhere in Boot Hill Cemetery, flowers would continue to grow on the graves of Margaret Kearney and Thomas Harper, tended by the descendants of the two people whose lives those first loves had shaped. It was a good life, Owen thought as sleep finally claimed him. A life built on the foundation of loss but reaching toward hope. A life that proved second chances were possible, that new beginnings could bloom in the most unlikely soil, and that love in all its forms was the most powerful force in the world. In the warm darkness of their bedroom, surrounded by the house full of family they had created together, Owen and Delilah slept peacefully. The ranch rested quietly under the star-filled Colorado sky. And the story that had begun in a cemetery with flowers and grief, and an offer of new beginnings, continued its beautiful unfolding, a testament to the resilience of the human heart and the transformative power of love.